Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and so today's book is Dave Barry is Not Making This Up, and this book is one of my favorite exemplars, although that's really difficult to pick from, actually. It's one of my favorite exemplars of Dave Barry's collections. See, there are two kinds of books that Dave Barry released, basically. Well, three. He released books like Dave Barry's Guide to Guys, and Dave Barry's Only Gift Guide That You'll Ever Need, and those sorts of books, often inspired by specific columns that he wrote. And you can often find the original column somewhere where you say, oh yes, this is the column that book came from. But they're a full book on a particular topic, whether it's bad songs, which is particularly pertinent to this one, or anything else. As I said, guys or computers and the internet. This particular book, though, is of the second kind, the third kind being novels, which I have already done one of his novels for this. But this book is just a compilation, and it's a compilation of a bunch of articles that he wrote over the years. Some of these articles, you can tell that they were written distinctly before this particular book was published, because the copyright on this is 1994, and the thing is that that means that this was sort of put together and completed after the Soviet Union ceased to be a thing. But one of the articles in this talks about whoever's in charge of the Soviet Union this week. What that means, of course, is that that article was written before the Soviet Union fell apart, which was, if I recall correctly, remember, I do no research for these 90% of the time, I believe that was 92 when the Soviet Union broke up. But maybe it was 89? I never remember these things. The point is, because I never remember these things, the point that I'm making is that these articles sort of cover a range of points in time, but they were all written before 1994, so there are certain artifacts of the times that they were written in that you can see, including stuff like the trip to Bimini, or Bimini, I don't actually know how to pronounce that, which is part of the Bahamas, where they basically just got on a boat and took the boat across to the Bahamas and went through customs and then came back. And I'm not entirely certain how in the, as we call it these days, post-9/11 world, how easy that would be, because I happen to know that time was when you were crossing the border between Canada and the US, you took out your driver's license and you flashed at the border guards and drove on past. And when they ramped up security, that stalled out a lot of things at the borders until everybody was used to the new paradigm. But in any event, so this is a book that exemplifies, first of all, one of Dave Barry's constant refrains in his columns throughout the years, and that refrain is, I am not making this up. It's a refrain that actually dates back centuries, thousands of years. I don't recall which Roman playwright or writer of letters it was who said this, but what he said was, sometimes it is difficult not to write satire. And a lot of Dave Barry's columns are very much in the in that line. They're very much in the line of, I don't have to make a joke. I don't have to say something funny. I just have to make a statement about a factual thing that exists and then leave it up to the reader. And so many of these articles that he wrote are just descriptions of things. And for example, he talks about the story of a man named Al Oliver, a retired Navy chaplain, who, with several of his friends, in 1991, they won $4,000 from the lottery, and then he wound up basically in a massive fight with the IRS, which claimed thousands of dollars in taxes over these $4,000, because instead of just signing his name and saying, yes, I bought the ticket and I won it, and then splitting the check between all of them, what he instead did was he said it was the Lavender Hill Mob, at which point there was a whole contretemps where the IRS insisted that they should have filed back taxes for all the years that they had been a company. But and the way that, and all that he does in this is describe what happened. I mean, he puts it in ways that are particularly funny, because that is, of course, the key to observational humor is delivery. Because observational humor is not making jokes. Observational humor is not, I just flew in from Chicago and boy are my arms tired. It's, have you ever seen this thing? Boy is that thing funny. And you have to put it right. And that's really where Dave Barry's genius on this comes in. He just tells stories, and they're basically factual stories with a certain amount of hyperbole for comedic effect, and then leaves the rest up to us to understand what's funny about it. This is, of course, occasionally problematic, as we discover in another of his books of article compilations, which I will get to at some point, in which he describes some of the letters that he gets from people who don't seem to understand that as a humor column, that means that what he's saying is a joke. But he talks in the article, the series of articles in this that worked up to Dave Barry's book of bad songs. He has a series of articles where he talks about songs that he likes and songs that he doesn't like, and how angry people get over bad songs. All that he does in these articles is describe his opinion about songs that he doesn't hear enough on the radio and songs he hears too much, and then describes in future articles letters that he gets from people who are voting for or against particular songs, and some interesting key quotes from those people about those songs. And so Dave Barry is not making this up. Yes, it's a very, very funny book. But it really, really specifically exemplifies his storytelling, his observational humor storytelling as a columnist. Because these are columns in which he's just telling you things that he's seen, things that he's experienced, letters that he's gotten, articles that people have sent him in the mail. Whether these are articles about his wife and his son, articles about strange things that have happened with food. And they're just observational. They're just stories. They're just the funny stories that you tell at parties. And Dave Barry's genius is, in these cases, is finding a way to take these funny stories that you tell at parties and keep on finding funny stories to tell at parties, and to tell them better than the rest of us can. The other thing in here is that Dave Barry has a certain number of, has a few articles in here which he becomes serious. And the thing about Dave Barry as a serious writer is he's capable of it, and he can be really heartrending when he wants to be, when he feels it necessary. When he's talking about the day that his son got hit by a car. And he tells this story, and it's a story that I think will speak to a lot of parents, but it's told in such a plain way, and in his usual style. It's completely his usual style, and yet somehow he captures those feelings of panic that a parent will feel when faced with their child having had a serious illness or injury. He captures things so well, but in such wonderfully plain language. I probably shouldn't say this, but in some ways it reminds you of James Herriot. It reminds you of somebody who is just describing life as it happens around him. And you have his story about when his then 12-year-old son Rob went out for a bike ride and got hit by a car. And he tells this story in a way that really makes you feel that blind panic. It's not eloquence. It's not beautiful writing. What it is effective writing. It's writing that captures those feelings and captures them in a blunt way, in a very, very real way, in a way that needs to be distinguished from writers who put together beautiful sentences. He doesn't write beautiful sentences. What he writes is effective ones. When he is tugging on your heartstrings, whether by accident or on purpose, it's just so hard to describe. That he talks about after they've been told that, that there's been an accident, their son's been in an accident. Now Beth and I are in the car, and I'm driving too fast, but I have to see what I don't want to see. Up ahead, some people are gathered on the side of the road, and a woman is kneeling. She has blood on her dress, a lot of blood, and lying in front of her on his back, his face covered with blood, is... "Oh God," says Beth, "oh God. This is where it ends for some parents, right here on the roadside. My heart breaks for these parents. I don't know that I could survive it." It's very, very real, the way he writes. And so it's to be distinct from his novels, and distinct from when he's writing expansively and off the top of his head and silly things. All of the things in this are real. They're not made up. And because of this, it gives things a weight or a humor that isn't necessarily present in other humor or other fiction. And that's all I can say about it. Thanks, and see you next week.